Now I want to introduce Sherry Johnson for her technology segment for our show, which again is on 3D. Sherry, welcome.
Thank you, Jim. Let me get my screen shared here. And tonight is going to be the final installment where we talk about CAD applications. Next week, we're going to pick up with more hardware-related fun things. But tonight, we're going to talk about specialized modeling applications. We've talked about hard surface modeling. We've talked about sculpting. Now we're going to take a look at some programs that are designed and dedicated for specific things so that you don't have to start from scratch. And a lot of the times, none of us want to reinvent the wheel, so these are good tools to have in our tool belt. The first one we're going to take a look at is some programs that are dedicated to creating animals and figures and bugs, if you want to do bugs. You can also create and pose your figures as well and clothe them. So these are basically living models. Poser was released in 1995, and I had used it from that very beginning to actually do videos for Delta Airlines to train their flight attendants on how to get people on and off airplanes. So it's been around for quite a while. DAZ Studio came out in 2005 and has definitely given Poser a run for its money. Matter of fact, about 5-10 years ago, I made the switch from Poser to DAZ Studio because I could get more things that were already created that I didn't have to do from scratch. And then there's a very simple tool called Make Human. This is going to be a good entry-level tool for anybody that just wants to make people. It's very simple, straightforward. You select male, female, body type, size, put them in the pose that you want them in, and you're done. With Poser and DAZ Studio, you have a lot more options where you can actually go in and sculpt the face and change the shape of the body, pose individual figures. And something that DAZ Studio has been teasing us with the last few months is they are looking at the ability to import a photograph and actually use that to create your 3D figure of yourself. So there will be, it will shape the face and the body and put hair where it's supposed to be based on that photograph. I'm anxiously awaiting to see if that happens. They've done it with 2D at the moment. You can get a nice 2D image, but I'm waiting to see that to happen with their 3D figures. If they come through with it, it's going to be an amazing game changer. Both Poser and DAZ will also allow you to animate. For anybody that's doing some online work, you can actually create these figures and have them walk through a video or a building if you do any type of animation. Here's a short little video using DAZ Studio, and basically, this is from my library. I have tons and tons of assets and different figure shapes, but I'm using one of the basic ones that comes free with the application. And I just selected a male figure, added him to my workspace, went down to my wardrobe, picked some clothes for him, went to my hair, decided, what do I want his hair to be? Clicked the hair. And we now have a fully dressed figure with hair in a basic pose. So now I want to have him do some action. I'm going to want him walking. So I come to my pose, I come to my walking section, and boom, this is a predefined walking stance. Now, they do have some poses which to me are not realistic. I usually go in and tweak everything, but you can go through and pose it by hand yourself, select some of the poses that are already available, and it's a good way to get a figure and to just go with it. Sitting, standing, running, jumping. You can also put multiple figures in here if you needed a couple dancing or something like that. You can do interactive figures. Matter of fact, I just updated our bride and groom dancing and had 2 people in the display. So that was pretty simple. I mean, and that's actually real time. I did not speed that video up. So that is actually real time creating a figure in DAZ Studio. I will post a PDF version of this with the live links and the video after this is over up on the New Tracks channel so that you can take a look there. Poser does have a fee of $249, and you can purchase additional assets. DAZ Studio is free, and it comes with a lot of free figures, but you can also purchase additional assets there. DAZ Studio also has a program where you can become a premium member, where you pay an annual fee, and you can get select models for free. You can get select models for $1, $1.99. I use that quite frequently as I get special requests for different things. Most recently, I went up there and found a bunch of kids because I didn't have a lot of kids, and just scaling an adult does not make a kid. Make Human is completely free, but it also is very limited. The cool thing is, all three of these, you can export your files so that they can be sent off and 3D printed. All right, next up on our specialized software, we're going to take a look at 2D image creation and editing, which this comes in handy if you're creating, say, billboards or backdrop images and so forth for your layouts. You can scale existing images. So if you see a photo in a catalog and it's like, oh, that would be great on my scale model, but I only need it a certain size, you can scale it here. There are two different types of 2D imaging editing software. The first is Bitmap, which here you can see a bitmap image is made of pixels or little dots that are either on or off and assigned a particular color. And you can actually see each little individual dot. And then we have vector images, which are objects are created using lines and shapes, and then all that algebra and calculus kicks in there, and it actually does the mathematical formula so that you actually get a nice smooth curve. There are a few programs out there, but I picked Photoshop to show the basics here because Photoshop is probably the most well-known graphics photo imaging software. And here we're just going to run through some of the different tools that you can use to modify a photograph. Photoshop in its later years has also added some vector tools, some very basic vector tools. So that's why I picked Photoshop for this little demonstration, because I could basically kill two birds with one application here. Now this one was sped up, so I apologize if you don't catch everything, but I will post the link to this up on NewTracks. This is one of my favorite features. I love using this one where you can select a source and then recreate it someplace else. I use this a lot when editing images. And as you're doing this, it's actually copying each little individual pixel, every little dot. The spot healing is also great. I've used this a lot too. This is great if you've ever taken photographs and you've got red eyes, you want to get rid of the red eyes, that's good. You can sharpen edges, blur edges, just some of the basic tools to modify a photograph. I know my stepson has used this when he has taken photographs and he's updated things and made pictures to hang on the wall. I used this back in the fortunately back in the 80s when I got married and then divorced, and my parents loved my wedding pictures, so I just used Photoshop to just get rid of the ex-husband and just leave me in the picture, which my mother appreciated greatly. I don't think my ex-husband did, but and you can see here the different things with it: brightening, darkening, the erase tool. When you use the erase tool, you have to be careful because it erases everything, including anything that's background. Here we're showing some of the vector images, which text is always best if you do it as a vector image. And here we can see that we're creating a box using a tool, and you've got anchor points that you can use to size and resize and change things. Here you're actually working with the object, much like we did with hard surface modeling, but only as a 2D versus a 3D application. And Photoshop also has a lot of free, I want to say, built-in graphics that you can copy and use. Again, because it is the most widely recognized and also the oldest. It too came out in, let's see, Mac came out in 84. I want to say it came out in 85 or 86, Photoshop came out. All right, now, Basically for bitmap, I just mentioned, you've got Adobe Photoshop. For those of us who are on budgets, there is an open source version called GIMP. It works pretty much the same as Photoshop, has all the same features. I no longer subscribe. Actually, once all these applications started going to subscriptions, I started looking for pay once, use forever, or free versions, which is why I now use GIMP for my bitmap. And for vector applications, I use Inkscape. It too has the same functionality as Adobe Illustrator, which a lot of the Illustrator function is now in Photoshop. So you could probably do away without Illustrator these days. But if you're doing anything that needs crisp edges, use your vector application. If you're doing photos, use your bitmap. Next up, a whole crazy category, which this one could have a whole, probably 3 or 4 part segment all on its own. Railroad design layout software. For those of you that want to give up on the graph paper and pencil and paper and protractors and compasses, when I did my search, I found that there was probably 75 or 80 applications out there that could do this. So I kind of picked the top 10, and this is what I came up with. And again, a lot of these are going to be based on your personal reference, preferences. Since I don't do model railroading, I don't have an expertise here, but if you're working on an Apple Mac, I do highly recommend the Rail Modeler Pro. I do use that because it lets me design slot car layouts on it. It includes model railroads and slot cars, so you can combine the two, which is why it's my favorite. And I've done some screenshots here of the different types of things that you can see in each application. And we also have some others in here. And the third Planet Track software, that kind of strikes me as interesting because it actually lets you design your building as well as the actual layout. You can go in and say, okay, here's my basement. You can recreate your basement and actually do the building and place your wall outlets where you want power and everything to be, which I found that was kind of unique. I hadn't seen that in any of the other software. The other was designing your track plan, where this includes planning your track as well as the environment that your track is going to be placed into, which I thought was pretty cool. A few selected features from the applications. DAZ Studio, like I said, it's ready to use. You can actually draw things in your sculpting programs or your hard surface modeling programs and import those into DAZ Studio. So if you needed a figure holding a pull cue, you could draw your pull cue someplace else and import it, and then have your figure, you could pose it to hold the pull cue or anything else you want. Photoshop, they're again touting the addition of artificial intelligence, which later in our series we're going to discuss a lot about AI. But they're supposed to be able to go in and do some work just by you suggesting what you want done to your photograph. I'm still skeptical. I'll see it when it works. Again, I mentioned here the Rail Modeler Pro because it does slot car layouts, and it pretty much has every scale train. You can create shopping lists. The folks here are pretty cool. If there's a manufacturer that you don't know, you can ask them and they will contact them about putting their parts into their catalog. Another one that merit interest that caught my attention was CAD Rail. Besides doing your layout, it actually has a track simulation where you can actually run your model trains on your track plan to see how they're going to perform, which will let you know whether or not that turn you put in is too tight, or if you want to make it tighter or too loose. It will actually, you can actually crash a train. I did play around with that, and I have to admit that I was having fun crashing the trains and running them off the curves. But it was it's pretty cool that you can do that within that particular application. So depending upon what your specific needs are, especially with the CAD software here for the layout design, most of them have limited free versions. So click the links, take a look at them, and see which ones have the features that would best suit your particular needs. And again, the best software to use is the one that you take the time to download and learn how to use. All right, next up, as I said, future segments, we're going to get into some actual physical tools versus computer stuff. We're going to get into craft cutters, all the different types of cutters or different machines out there to cut things besides fingers. We'll have the intro on the 10th. On the 17th, we're going to discuss different types of blade cutters, and on the 31st, laser cutters. And Bob Davidson, he's graciously agreed to actually give us a demonstration on the 31st with his laser cutters. So we're going to look forward to that. And that's it for this evening. Any questions?
Sherry, I have a question.
Yes.
What's the easiest way to transfer an Adobe Illustrator file into Inkscape, do you suppose?
I have not done a direct version. I know that if you export out of Illustrator as an SVG file, you can bring that into Inkscape as an SVG file, which means it should be totally editable in there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. You're welcome. All right.
A few comments about the track planning software.
Yes.
Because over the years I've played with a few of them. This is Phil, the other Phil. I've used CADRail almost since it was introduced. I was a beta tester for a while, and it is one of the tougher ones to learn because it is a true CAD program. You draw circles, you draw lines, you have tangent points, all of those type of things where if you're not a geometry major or you haven't had to deal with that in the past, it could be a little challenging. For people that are professional layout designers that do that on paper, having a tool that can do that on a computer is very useful. For the hobbyist, some of the simpler tools, like I think Atlas, was it AnyTrack or Atlas Track? I can't remember. Some of those simpler ones are easier to learn, but they are limited. They work with, sectional pieces of track. They might not support FlexTrack, that sort of thing. The real key is it just depends on how many layouts you think you're going to build. If you're only going to build one, then do it the good old-fashioned way with paper, craft paper, put that big piece of brown paper on the floor in the basement and get down there with your crayons and draw on it. But if you think you're going to be doing more than one layout or helping somebody else do them, it pays to learn one of these programs.
And I noticed that in reviewing several of them, some of them supported FlexTrack, some of them did not support FlexTrack, some supported tons of manufacturers, some didn't. So it's going to be basically looking at, what your need is. And like Phil said, if you're doing it a one-off, pencil and paper and drawing on the floor might work. If you want to just try a bunch of different layouts to see how they're going to fit, being able to do it on the computer can be beneficial.
I'm one of those odd people that I think over my lifetime, I've probably built a dozen layouts, half of which were designed in CADRail. So
Cool.
Well,
All right.
Sherry, thank you so much for this evening. We appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you next time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Uh-huh.